We are at the very end of October of 2023, and the leaves outside are already turning red and yellow, and the temperatures are dropping fast. At the same time, it seems that the real estate market temperature is rising. Of course, what I'm saying is purely anecdotal. We're seeing our own listings, we're seeing our own transactions, and I'm making a claim that the market is improving just based on that. But in reality, I might be deluding myself by looking at a very narrow set of facts. And I want to actually look at a broader picture of what's going on in real estate, look at some data together with you, and decide if the market is actually improving and there's a reason for optimism or not. Before we get into that larger conversation, let's just talk about what constitutes a better market in the first place. And I would argue that a better market, or at least a market that is better than what we have right now, would be a market with a higher velocity of transactions, where there's a lot more that's going on, the market that is fluid. You can break down any marketplace in terms of its current market temperature into three categories. You can have a seller's market, you can have a balanced market, and you can have a buyer's market. Traditionally, a seller's market is a marketplace where the existing inventory, i.e. all of the available homes for sale, would absorb or get absorbed, i.e. sell off, within 5 to 6 months. So if everything sells off in under 6 months, that's a seller's market territory. In Toronto, though, traditionally, the seller's market was at a range of 2 to 2.5 months. So if the inventory would sell off within that time frame, we would say, yep, that's clearly a seller's market. And that's what we had over the past couple of decades, with a few exceptions. 2008, 2017, then 2019, borderline 2020 during the pandemic. We were in the seller's market for most of the time in the past 2 decades. As of late, though, this year, the market started shifting, and the current levels of inventory, or inventory absorption, are roughly at between 5 to 6 months across all property types. So all of the current inventory in Toronto would get absorbed within 5 to 6 months. So we're definitely teetering on the brink of being in the buyer's territory, and we already crossed the balanced market territory a few months ago. You could say that it doesn't really matter. It's 6 of one or half a dozen of the other. Either one group benefits, the sellers, or the other group benefits, the buyers. But either way, the market could be conducive, whether it's the seller's market or the buyer's market, to a higher velocity, to more trades, more fluidity. But if you look at this a bit more closely, you would notice that a seller's market is normally associated with prospering economy, low interest rates, and high levels of affordability. Whereas when we're looking at the buyer's markets, and you can look at any period in time, usually we're talking about higher rates, stagnating economy in a decline, and low affordability. That's exactly what's happening right now. And at the same time, it doesn't seem that the real estate price is subsiding fast enough for the demand and supply equation to balance itself. So let's look at some broader sets of data and see if the market is actually changing for the better, for the worse, or maybe it's stagnating and staying in the same place. As I'm sure you noticed, the Bank of Canada decided to hold the overnight rate at 5%. The announcement was made last Wednesday, and following the announcement during the press conference, the bank's governor had brought up 2 issues that could potentially have big influence over the bank's decision whether to hold interest rates again in December or to increase them. The first issue is the instability in the Middle East, and it is a volcano there that is just waiting to erupt. It could have huge impact on energy prices around the world, and of course it could have a big influence of what's happening with the economy in Canada and on the bank's decisions moving forward. And the second one is the fiscal policy of the federal government. So that's another reason for concern. Depending on how much money is going to get printed between 2023, or what's remaining of it, and 24, that could also have a big impact on what the bank decides to do come December or in 2024. So let's scoop over to the next article on betterdwelling.com. And this article is from a report by the National Bank of Canada. The caption here reads, "Canada still hasn't seen the full impact of Bank of Canada rate hikes." And they have a great chart in the middle of the page. On the y-axis, you have the interest rates from 0 to 5, and on the x-axis, you have the time frame from 2021 first quarter to 2023 quarter 3, and then last quarter. As you see in the bar on the right, which is multicolored, there are 2 colors. The color red indicates that the impact of the rate hikes hasn't been felt yet, And the blue color indicates that, yes, it's been felt. So 58% of the impact of the interest rate hikes over the year 2023 has already been felt within the economy. But there is still 42% that we haven't felt that is still remaining and will be coming in over the next year. So even if the bank does not change interest rates and things stay the same, we are still in store to feel the full impact of the interest rate hikes that had already happened between now and the end of 2024. So what we're seeing is that the full impact of the changes introduced by the Bank of Canada through interest rate hikes over the course of 2023 have not yet trickled down through all the layers of economic activity in Canada. We still have about 42% of those changes that we yet to feel. And those worrisome 42% of concern, not only to consumers, but also to politicians who got busy last week. 3 provincial premiers penned an open letter to the Bank of Canada asking the bank to stop interest rate hikes, ostensibly in a bid to improve housing affordability, although I'm not exactly sure what they're thinking. To me, it seems like a cheap populist shot aimed at appeasing the electoral base for 2024, knowing that there's trouble brewing right now. Every time, and if you look at any period in time of the past 30 years, the period of substantial price hikes in housing coincided almost perfectly with the period of time when the interest rates were lowered or stayed low. So the Bank of Canada retorted by saying that the politicians should not be trying to influence the decisions by the Bank of Canada, and they will do whatever it is that they think they should do, following their mandate. So that's exactly what we're going to see. The Bank of Canada is going to try to act independently of the political pressures. The next story is a bit of an aside, and the reason why I'm bringing this up in this video is because several articles that I've read about it are making assertions that it could be a harbinger of bigger things to come down the road. And the story itself has to do with a developer that's been working on constructing 1 Bloor Street West since 2019, and in the process, they've taken out a loan for $1.35 billion, and they stopped making payments on that loan, and the loan went into receivership. So the developer is essentially bankrupt. Yes, $1.35 billion, as the article here on the Better Dwelling claims, is a staggering amount. It is a staggering amount, but will it have a larger impact on the Canadian economy, like a domino-like effect? It is very unlikely, because the overall size of the real estate market, or the value of the real estate market in Canada, is at $6.1 trillion. We're talking about a default of $1.35 billion, so it's a fraction of a percent, and no, it will not have a precipitous impact on the overall real estate market in Canada at all. So I personally would be inclined to dismiss those speculative claims. The next topic of a conversation has to do with housing affordability in Canada, and of course, over the last couple of months, we've seen and heard a lot of claims from policymakers that things are changing for the better, that the budgets have been allocated, that the policies have been put in place and implemented, and things are improving. New construction starts are higher than they ever were. And yet, there's this article from BMO, a report from BMO, where the title reads, "Canada can't double housing output. It can't even stop it from dropping." Gosh, and I like this first line in the article. If photos of policymakers in construction vests were new homes, Canada's housing supply would be booming. Absolutely, it would be. But it's not. And then there's a chart that shows you the stark reality of what's going on. So that's 2010, that's 2020, borderline between 2019 and 2020 in the thick of the pandemic. And you see that new construction for residential properties right now in 2023 is almost at the same level as when we were in the thick of the pandemic just a few years back. So no, things are not looking up for residential construction, and therefore things are not looking up for affordability. So continuing the conversation about housing affordability, the next topic is what's happening with condos. And condos have traditionally been, over the past couple of decades, the go-to investment for people in Ontario, for investors in Ontario. And here we see that based on the report released by StatCan, most of Canada's new condos are still owned by investors. This information is coming from the Canadian Housing Statistics Program. And there's a chart where the type of ownership is broken down by province. We are interested in the province of Ontario, and we see that the number of newly constructed condos owned by investors is in excess of 50%. I guess naturally and understandably, in the interest rate environment where the rates are close to zero for extended periods of time, and real estate market being out of control and growing at times at 20 to 30% per year, that was a natural thing for people to do, to invest into real estate in anticipation of the market appreciation, which for the most part had happened in the past 20 years. So if people bought at the right time, the market had appreciated and they got off that gravy train at the right time as well, they were laughing on their way to the bank. Although it doesn't help with first-time home buyers and doesn't help with improving affordability at all. What we're seeing also in this chart is that in Manitoba and New Brunswick, the number of investors, and this is not apparent from the chart, but this is from the article, the number of investment-owned properties, new construction condo properties, have dropped over the past few months quite substantially. And it seems that this segment of the market is self-regulating. So when the investors are feeling the pinch and they think that they've over-leveraged themselves, they go in the market and they try to sell. So we're seeing a very similar dynamic in Ontario, certainly in Toronto, where there's a lot of condos for sale, not a lot of them are selling, and investors are trying to deleverage right now, so they go on in the market trying to sell before things get worse. And the last topic on affordability has to do with consumers' ability to qualify for mortgages in today's economic environment. If you were to approach a lender today asking for a 5-year fixed-term mortgage, you will likely be looking at 6.5% interest. When they're going to be qualifying your ability to pay, they will not be qualifying you against your ability to pay on 6.5%. They'll be doing it on your ability to pay against 8.5% because there's a 2% for stress test that's thrown in. For context, if you're looking to get into a $1 million mortgage, which is absolutely normal given property prices in Toronto, your monthly mortgage obligations before the lender will roughly equal $6,200. If this is a mortgage that you're renewing and you got your first mortgage 4 or 5 years ago in 2018 or 2019 at 3.5%, say, then your payments at that time would have been close to $4,300, $4,400. So the difference between what you would have had to pay then and what you have to pay now when you renew is almost $2,000. And most people that are salaried have no option of dialing up their income. So now they have just a handful of options to consider. They can default on the property payments if they're feeling that the money that's coming in is not enough for them to cover all of their monthly expenses. They can rent out a part of the property if it's possible, if it's rentable. If it's a condo, then you cannot do much with it. Or they can go in the market and try and sell it. And that's actually the trend that we're seeing, particularly with condos and not only with investors, but people that have bought either in the past couple of years and they cannot meet their monthly mortgage obligations, or people that are renewing now as well and feeling the pinch in the marketplace, they trying to offload and deleverage. So I want to recoup and I want to go back to the beginning of the video when I was making an assertion based on anecdotal evidence within the team that we see more showings, more offers, and a faster pacing of activity when it comes to our own listings and buyers. But having looked at a broader set of data, having looked at the decisions made by the Bank of Canada and their projections for 2024, having looked at the affordability and the overall buyer sentiment, it doesn't seem that situation is improving. In all likelihood, the interest rates are going to stay at the same level or higher until at least the last quarter of the next year, based on the assertion by the Bank of Canada, where they're saying that the possibility of interest rate decreases is going to be postponed until Q4 2024. And they've made several statements about interest rates decreasing and the timing of such decreases before that were never correct. So, could be 24, could be 25. It's highly improbable that this will come any sooner than the last quarter of the next year. And if you're feeling that you can ill afford the payments on the first of the month and you're projecting your situation to the future and you're seeing that there is some troubled waters ahead, so the first thing that I would suggest that you do is get in touch with your lender, talk to them, see if they can assist you and help you lower your monthly payments, maybe by increasing your amortization. And if the answer from them is a no, then I would suggest that you get in touch with us for a 15-minute phone consultation. We're going to include the link to our calendar in the description below. It's a very simple process. You click on the link, you find the time that works for us and the time that works for you. We allocate that 15 minutes, we have a conversation with you, and we help you make the right decision based on your specific circumstances, based on your location and your price point. So guys, if you like the content, hit the like button, consider subscribing so that you do not miss any of the updates that are coming out every week. And I'm looking forward to seeing you again next week.